peaceful political practices in Kisumu and Kenya is a narrative we need not only to preach, but live as an example in our spaces. What is your take?
I think as young people right now, we are representing some fresh thought on what the guys we found in politics. I remember when growing up, in our campaigns or during election period in 1990, the campaigns were, if you were not strong, you would not probably try and go into politics. So I'm happy and I'm glad the there are advances that we made with the new constitution, especially on the Bill of Rights, and allowing everyone to have its own space in terms of what everyone wants. So growing up in Kisumu, there used to be violent campaigns, and then it was mwenye nguvu mpishi. It wasn't, there were very few guys. If you are young guy and women, very few women participating and very few young participating. But like I say, the advances in new constitution, and now that the new generation that is we who are trying to come up, filling the space, have injected new political ideas. And it's now more, we are slowly going away from the heckling and throwing of stones that were tolerable then to issue-based discussions. And it's now become everyone's playground who would want to go into. So for me, as we continue as a democracy, as we continue to move ahead, we don't have any option but to maintain the momentum that our peaceful environment creates.
My take is as simple as how we correlate. And actually this now should start from our neighborhoods. How do we relate with one another? And this should be irrespective of our race, our tribe, or our political affiliations. Because you realize Kenya is predominantly tribal, because we elect our leaders based on our tribal affiliations. But also you look at the minorities in some areas, like for example here in Kisumu, the majority are the Luos, the minority are the Nubians or the Wahindis. So how do we relate with them? But also speaking about peaceful coexistence is how are we organizing as a society in terms of being productive? Because we are not supposed to be agents of destruction, war, or the almost similar cycle of after every 5 years as we approach elections, we have violence, or whatever is called the post-election violence, or things that really lead to destruction. So it's about ourselves. But at the same time, I will echo what George has mentioned, because for a society to exist peacefully, it has to work together with other people, but at the same time, the economy is basically based on that peaceful existence. That's why we can have even investors coming around to invest in Kenya, say coming to Kisumu. And a practical example is what Kisumu has been doing in the last few years. We are planning to host the Afri-Cities. Why are we having the Afri-Cities? It means there's a change, there's a paradigm shift in terms of how we are perceived. Because Kisumu is perceived to be a hotspot, yeah? So how are we changing the narrative of now being not a hotspot, but now an economic hub?
If we ensure participation of all, and all means in capital, then as citizens, we are ensured of that peace. Because in most of the time, we realize that we share passive peace. And there is that narrative that I don't want to be controversial, so let me live with it. It is very passive. But the peace where we ensure that we engage, like what we are doing here, that is the only way to go. Because if you ensure that participation, then we get different voices. And different voices, of course, they count. And that is what entails growth. But if we want to live in a scenario where there are very few voices that when they speak, they can be heard. And when a youth speaks and it's like you don't have experience, then it becomes a gap. Like now when we are seated here, I'm sure even if it is contribution, each idea counts. And that is what we bring on board to take us to another level.
I would say that we should have elements of inclusivity within our county, and I believe that we have some gaps that need to be filled, especially when it comes to women. I think that it's high time women take these elective posts and fill these gaps, so that we have an all-inclusivity in the government, and also to also include the public in decision making with all the challenges that affect them, and give them that platform for engagement.
How can we work together as residents of Kisumu County and Kenya to curb the harsh reality of economic and social effects of COVID-19 pandemic?
What I'd say is that first of all, we need to work with the communities that we live within, especially starting from the grassroots, which is the ward level. We need to engage the community on various decision making, so that we come with a more sustainable economic development agenda for our people in the county.
This goes to Levy. Public participation and citizen participation are key for societal conducive functions. Are we on track, or are we still dragging behind?
Actually, this speaks out for itself, because when we were doing the introductions, you realize the people were saying that I'm coming from some units that they don't know it's the identity of their wards. So because this starts from us, how do we involve ourselves in these spaces? How do we understand our localities? And actually, I'll ask you a question. You are an upcoming voter. There's nothing like an upcoming voter. You are either a voter or not a voter. You get the point. It is a simple, it's just black and white. Yeah, so it is important to understand, why do you want to vote? Yeah, but your answer was right. You want to make a change because you've seen some left or right center, the evils or whatever that's happening. But participation is not just also based on what we know is done by the county government or the national government. It's your involvement. Are you involved in that key decision-making space? And actually, we still say we are short of that, because even as what Eunice has said, you realize the youth are left out in some spaces, the persons with disabilities, but at the same time, what is our engagement in these spaces? Tunajitolea kweli, and most of the time you realize if you don't participate in something, you don't know, you are just there because that decision has been made for you. It is the same way I look at the political scenario that we have. Some people are lamenting about the high cost of living, the fuel prices, but it's still said the majority had their way. Sindio, if you had your time and fall back and say you had that weapon to change the direction of the country, would you have voted? It is the same question we are having, that I would have not voted for this particular political party. But participation also takes different forms. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 has put it in black and white also, that participation takes different forms. Are you involved in your county processes? Even the small projects that are happening in your area. And actually, I'll ask yourself, wangapi wetu wamekuwa kwa zile miradi zinafanyika kwa eneo zetu? How many of us participate in those miradi? Hata tukujua barabara inatengenezwa. How many of us are aware of that? So we have a gap.
As an aspirant and a leader, what changes, solutions, and integrity are you bringing on board to the political atmosphere and also to the Kenya fraternity leadership?
First, I'm a proponent that Section 6, the Ethics and Integrity Act, first needs to be implemented with all the actors. We have seen in other fora our leaders, quote unquote, behaving badly in terms of how they interact with the people, or they interact in other fora. Leaders per se, the way people see them, should be role models. Because for myself, when I was growing up, those people whom I could see in leadership, I sort of started following them keenly. When you open the newspapers, most of the political leaders, they're the people in the newspapers, they're the people on TVs. So they first should be role models. So in terms of what I am bringing is somehow the fresher ideas that the chapter 6 in terms of the integrity and the ethics of how an actual leader is supposed to behave, how we are supposed to relate with people, things like trying to incite or doing that to war, bring peace and cohesion between different actors. That's possibly the fresh look that I'll try to bring. Secondly, leaders are problem solvers. If you are a leader and people come to you for problem, you should seek how to help them. This may come in terms of other relations that you have with people that you are supposed to help them. But there is in a gap whereby, for me, I believe if you're a leader, I should not be complaining like the guy who voted for me, because I'm a servant for the normal Mwananchi. So if the normal Mwananchi is crying that this can be sorted by the government, and the leader is also saying that he is helpless, it puts this condition, or it puts this situation in a very pathetic way. So by that it means, how are we going to solve societal issues, things that help Mwananchi? For me, the three most important things as of now in Kisumu County are probably joblessness or lack of employment. There is high cost of living, and there is hunger that affect, or opportunities that are not there for people to earn. So in town specifically here are trading opportunities. So my intention first and foremost is how we can expand all these opportunities so that Kisumu, we can accelerate the development that Kisumu has. How can we expand so that you, the student, the guy in college, you should graduate and you don't think of going to Nairobi. Many of my peers whom I schooled with here are all in Nairobi. Why are they in Nairobi? There are no opportunities. They people who are here cannot find income at places they would like to be. So that's a challenge for us, and that's a challenge for the leadership of Kisumu. And being that possibly I'm looking for MCA for Market Milimani, I will not solve Market Milimani issues. I will be in the assembly debating issues affecting majority young people of Kisumu County. By extension, I'll be solving Market Milimani issues. And I'll be solving Market Milimani internally or at micro level for the business opportunities that exist here. We believe, Joseph just got 1 minute, we believe that for a place to grow, private sector plays a huge deal. Do we have leaders who go out of our way to brand the places that they come from? That when we are in Nairobi for a workshop, he can say, let me visit this place, so that there is an opportunity in Market Milimani or in Kisumu Central, and he basically, quote unquote, seduces investment. Because government alone cannot help the people. It's the coexistence between private and public sector that can make our economies thrive. And we are not going to grow without investments in this county.
When you look at, I'll focus more on the oversight when it comes to leadership. We find that most of our youths, they are not employed, they are unemployed. So I'll focus on the budgeting, especially the budget allocation for the youths, the sports and culture. How best can we utilize these allocations to better our youths and even women in Kisumu County, yeah? So then again, we need to do a civic education for our people to know and get the information, because you find that most of us, we don't even know that these funds exist. So we need to teach them and to walk the journey with them in the right direction on how best they can invest in themselves through these government funds that are readily available for us.
We need to harmonize the blueprint in relation to sustainable development goals, and my key aspect will be equity. Currently in Market Milimani, there is that huge gap that right now, if we are talking about even the issues of meals, you find that some families can only afford 1 meal in a day, while others have extra. And the only way you can, from research, you can just go to the supermarket. You will find somebody picking essentials like sugar, flour, and what are some of these essentials? cooking oil, toilet paper. And then somebody will come with a trolley that has things worth even 15,000 shillings, that some of them you cannot mention their names, but you are able to see them, like crackles, a crackle that costs around 2,500. You can find somebody buying. What are some of these luxuries that we know that we can talk about to a tune of that 15,000? And this somebody who is taking 500 for the essentials. So that is a gap. And the way to bridge the gap is in relation to the health aspect. If we can play an oversight role by discussing with the health practitioners to know exactly what is it at the health sector. Because once you are not eating well, what will happen? You are likely not to perform anywhere in place of work as a youth, and even if your reproductive system is also affected. So these are some of the things that we need to combine our efforts together and address in terms of equity.
You as a leader, what would you suggest? Because kuna vitu zingine as a person or as a young person, I see impossible. We can't run away from them. We have to have that balance in the society where some people are poor and some people are rich. Yeah. So, work a leader, what do you think you can do differently to ensure that all of us are equal?
We cannot be equal, and that is a reality. But we can have some equity. Equity means that, like for example, me, I come up with the policies that will ensure that youths are able to engage at a certain platform. And that is why I was giving an example. How then do we ensure that our youths that have completed college level get access to job market? Getting into job market means that already you started the journey, the journey to engage in the existing structure so that you are able to get employment. Nobody will come, the adverts will find you at home, but we want those adverts to find you when you are already in those spaces so that you can enter. How then do we engage? Not me alone, because me, I represent you. So how do we engage with the same youths so that their voices are heard and we come up with policies that can address such gaps? Yeah? How then do we come up with policies that engage the youths such that the issue of sexual reproductive health issues are addressed at the community level? So if we do that collectively, then it will be a plus. Because you find, as we are just representatives, but the things that we are representing there are the ones that have come from the common mwananchi. That is why we really emphasize that people should go for public participation. The way you are young, if you have the information about public participation, kindly do ask questions and we'll grow together. In the spaces where we are, we ensure that a certain percentage of youths, women, are in those forums such that they also learn. Because most of us have been mentored by civil society organizations. To an extent now we can have that voice. So how then do we nurture our youths again so that they can also have the same voice?
George, you mentioned on seeing the implementation to entirety of the Chapter 6 of the Constitution. What we currently know is the requirements, the clearances, the health clearances, the CRB clearances, the good conduct. This is what we currently know. And this is also required of the young people who are jobless. If you look at all these clearances, a young person who's jobless, of which I heard you mention that is one of the issues you want to sort, will be required to get close to 5,000 to get the certificates. How could you help in sorting this?
Some of these things are lobbying and working with leaders. There are certain regulations and laws that only national government can help.
Yeah.
It is impossible to somehow create some exemption for Kisumu youth while we are looking for jobs somewhere in Mombasa. And so the only thing is possibly to lobby with organizations, goodwill organizations. I believe if these issues get escalated and we have our young representative in parliament and organizations like Levy's organization, Youth Alive, they sort of have a voice in Siasa Place, so that we make sure I cannot change specifically for Kisumu. I can just use the platform to highlight some of these things. But I think if done at the national level, by our legislators, more voices and organizations, like I think Levy may have a word on that. I believe it's a hindrance. It has been highlighted. I really do not know why still it's not resolved. Yes, but it has been highlighted. Adi kwa bunge. Sakaja has talked about it. Keter, Gideon has talked about it. But it looks like government is rigid. But I still believe they have the power as the assembly to do something.
When we are speaking about Chapter 6 on leadership and integrity, it just speaks about the character of the leader that you want to elect. But the so-called health clearance, KRA, certificate of good conduct, are just purposively deliverables to understand the kind of leader you want to be involved in. But we also, previously before Constitution of Kenya 2010, the parameters are very clear that you must be of a sound mind, not to have been in prison for the last 6 months, and a lot of stuff. But again, this is a conversation, like he has mentioned. It's about lobbying, and lobbying speaks about influencing change in a legislative action. So it's all about lobbying, and some of the actions that have been done by, yes, Keter himself, and even before the ripple to it, there was a discussion around even having a youth database system, the creation of the National Employment Authority. And if you are privy to information, you realize it is the civil society who went to court, public litigation, and actually we are part of that consortium that provided that public litigation for the rejection of the IIMP, Mary Wamboi, to be the chairperson of National Employment Authority, because this was a focus for the youth, not the old people. But again, it's just continuous lobbying, because again, some national frameworks, because what we are working with are just frameworks that have been picked from the national frameworks that we have at the county government. It's the same way when we are speaking about county government, this comes again from the devolved government, that is Chapter 11. Now we have County Governments Act that gives the powers to govern ourselves as a county. So these are things that we need to be informed with. But at the same time, it is just continuous lobbying, but also enforcing them. We are approaching elections. Yeah, we are approaching elections, and what will happen is the same way politicians who have been in power come back and say, yes, we will change this. We want to change this narrative. Why can't they not change it now? So it is that from that point that we also need to be involved. But you know, you can't be involved when you don't have a support base. Because lobbying is one form of advocacy. And for advocacy, you need numbers. But if there are no numbers, like we are content with the way things are, then things will forever remain the way they are.